We're at the solution states of EarthX. Welcome to John Dabbar, the Executive Director of the National Petroleum Council.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Good to have you, John. So, when you are representing an institute that is associated with oil, I want to first bring up this thing that we may all think about when we talk about the planet here at EarthX and the needs of the planet. There is this crazy sort of juxtaposition that I think there's probably no one here in this big conference around us who has not come here somehow using oil. And at the same time, all of us here think we need to get rid of oil. Now, you live in that juxtaposition all the time. How do you find your way there?
Well, it's a really interesting question. And one of the quotes I like to use is from 1970s environmentalist Amory Lovins, who liked to say, people don't want to buy energy, they want hot showers and cold beer. And so a big part of the work that the council does as a federal advisory committee is we bring together both the oil and gas industry and the roughly 90 members of the council from that industry with the other 90 members of the council who are not in the oil and gas industry. We have academics, electric power companies and utilities, state regulators, Native American tribal members, think tanks, environmental organizations. And so we really try to provide a wide aperture on here's energy policy. Yes, oil and gas is a part of it. But for example, and I'd like to talk more about it, electricity is a core part of what the council advises on. No surprise, you can make electricity from oil and gas, especially natural gas. And the industry uses a lot of electricity, particularly in refineries, chemical plants. So you can't have oil and gas without electricity or vice versa. So that's a big part of how we approach it. And we've really tried to focus on it's not either or. It's not, do you like oil and gas? Do you like electricity? There's a purpose for each. And that's how we approach it.
Can a National Petroleum Institute plan for a future without petroleum?
Probably not. It's probably beyond the time horizon of any of the policy advice that we give. Where the drivers that are inherent in our advice are what can we do to make energy reliable, affordable, and secure. Every one of our policy studies always involves an environmental concern, and that's environment writ large, not only greenhouse gases. We've done studies specifically to greenhouse gases, but sort of broadly on emissions reduction, air emissions, water emissions, and especially societal impact. So while it's not planning for a world beyond petroleum, it's for planning on making the petroleum industry a better contributor to society.
Can you even imagine you know a lot about oil. You're now running the Petroleum Institute, but before that you were an oil executive at one of the major players in that field.
Yeah.
So you know everything about oil and about how to provide energy to societies.
Mm-hmm.
Is it even possible? But you hear all those people at an environmental conference like this say, well, we need to we need to live in a world without oil. Do you believe in that?
Well, I respect that people have their view and have their aspirations. And I believe very strongly in listening to people who have contrary views. There's not a lot of benefit. Feels good, but there's no benefit in living in an echo chamber. So we really try to engage both as members of the council, but also widening the aperture and bringing in other viewpoints to say, okay, how can we incorporate your views into what we're trying to do? But one of our members, the former Secretary of Energy, would talk about how energy use in all forms has grown over time. And that we're using more energy in all forms than we have at any time in the past. And that includes, for example, biomass.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a growth in energy consumption because it correlates pretty well with standard of living.
Yeah. So with all that experience you have in that big and important industry for all of us, I can imagine. I mean, you may have children. I think you told me about at
Mhm.
least one of your sons playing ice hockey. We just talked about that. Um, you may even have grandchildren. You get at that age.
Mhm.
Um, do you get conversations in the family where they say, "Hey, Dad, you know, how do we create that clean future that is important to me as for my children and for the generations to come?"
Yes, absolutely. I have to stand up for my opinions and my views, even among those that are supposed to treat me with respect.
Fair enough.
So no, it's a very good question that I have to be prepared to give both the sort of official answers, but I also am very frequently called upon in small private settings to talk about those subjects. And I really go back to kind of the three key messages that are in our policy advice. The first, by making energy affordable, you allow people to have a better standard of living, and that's both in the U.S. and abroad. Um, that both developing and delivering energy requires input from the communities that are being impacted by that. Whether you're building an electric power line, a pipeline, putting in an oil well, somebody lives or works in and around that location. And you really need to get their concerns understood up front. Um, and incorporate what they really need, not what they maybe have read about, but what they really need to know, and tell them really this is what we're going to do to address your need. And then the third is, as I mentioned earlier, is continuous improvement on environmental protection. That is looking at all aspects of that, whether it's protecting the wildlife that live in and around where we're producing oil. Alaska is a great example of that. Um, Protecting the groundwater, the drinking water, the agricultural water,
Yes.
as well as clean air and following clean air rules and leading on clean air technologies.
You started your new job, I think 8 months ago,
Mhm.
so not even a year.
Mhm.
As a council, as you say, you advise the federal government on energy policy, so you create reports on whatever you think is important for the federal government to know.
Mhm.
Well, a new executive director comes in,
Mhm.
and I'm sure that somewhere he has a little list of things that I think we should do A, B, and C. So tell
Mhm.
me what you brought to your new job.
So the very first thing we started working on was a study on produced water. When you produce oil and gas, you get a fair bit of water that was underground with the oil. It's usually sort of a salty, dirty brine that comes up. Historically, it's been just injected back down into the ground. We took on, starting in December this past year, a study on how you can both treat and beneficially reuse that water. There's a saying in the West is that whiskey is for drinking and water is for fighting.
Yes.
And there's a lot of locations in the U.S. where there's an oil and gas industry that are also what they call water stressed locations. Not necessarily a seasonal drought, but where water is not so plentiful that you can afford to waste it.
Yes.
And so, how can we treat and beneficially reuse that water, both from a technical standpoint? How do you clean up water? It's a great science project, but also how do you uh, address the community's concerns that you tell me that's clean water, but I don't believe you, and I don't want to put it into my drinking water. I don't want to give that to my children. So, someplace in that continuum, there's a space for the technology and the public outreach to find a sweet spot that says we can process water and we can beneficially reuse it for these purposes.
I'm interested in the economic process because that must be that there's some expense to that. It doesn't come for free. Is that worth it, so to say?
Well, so when you say worth it, the first thing is if you don't dispose of the water that comes up with the oil, you don't produce the oil. So you,
Yeah.
you
That,
absolutely
that
have to do
part. That
something with it.
yeah, of
Yeah.
course. Yes.
So now it's how do we dispose of or reuse all of that water? Well, the first thing you do is you process the water and reuse it again in the process, in the oil and gas production process. By some statistics, roughly 95% of the water consumed in oil and gas production is reprocessed, reclaimed water. So that's the first point. The second is it's not an unlimited scenario where you can inject all that water underground without any concerns. That there's sort of upper limits, sort of technically, about how much water you can re-inject. Hence the concern about how do we reprocess it and reuse it.
And the price for the make it reusable. I mean, is that you have to use probably reverse osmosis or something like that to get it clean?
That's one of many technologies that are under, and there are entrepreneurs working on new water processing technologies beyond reverse osmosis that are in the lab or in pilot programs that we hope to see get deployed out into full-scale plants. And that's a big part of what we're doing is what is the so-called technology readiness level of these water purification technologies and their ability to deploy into the field.
So what do you see? What is the most exciting innovation in the oil and gas industry that you see coming?
So it would be trite to just say AI, but actually what's really important is what's called machine learning and digital twins.
Okay.
The ability to gather incredible amounts of data, have a model that is essentially duplicates what's happening in real life in a computer, and take all of that data and the model and predict what is supposed to happen next. So unlike a large language model where you put in a question and you get some text answers, this is I put in all the seismic data, all the temperature data, all the production data from all the wells in the area, and then I measure these parameters in real time. And this is what's supposed to happen, and this is what's really happening, and why is there a difference, and how do I adjust it? So machine learning with artificial intelligence. That's really exciting.
And how does that benefit me as a consumer?
So the goal is more affordable energy, lowering the cost of finding and developing and producing energy results in long-run marginal costs dropping and delivering less expensive energy.
And about that lower cost of energy, I see that as a major goal. You've said it a few times, and there is, of course, a business reason to say that, and that's good for communities. I can see that too. At the same time, I happen to come from a part of the world where gas prices are Europe, where gas prices are twice as high. Not because it's not as productive, but yes, because it's just a matter of taxing and making sure that people spend less on energy and use less energy, basically. I mean, that is a policy, but then not from your perspective.
So the last time I worked on a piece of that exact subject in 2024, rather than just using what we have in the past to say, well, and the solution is a carbon tax. We'd said that in several previous reports. We took our chairman said, take a much deeper dive into that. Look at all of the different market mechanisms that have been used around the world, or even have been theorized and haven't tried, and look at the pros and cons of each of those. Cap and trade, low carbon fuel standards, carbon border adjustment mechanisms, and pretty well-known subjects. And look at the pros and cons. And we wrote a really detailed paper basically saying, if these are the policy goals you have to achieve, here are the things you need, and you want to use this policy tool, here are the things you need to address to make it effective. Or here are the unintended consequences that might come from that particular mechanism.
You are at the beginning of a new career, after a long other career, but in the same field. What is your goal? What do you want to achieve?
So we do three things in the council, the council staff. The first and most important is that we provide the tools, resources, and systems to allow our members to very quickly respond to policy requests. So that in many cases, the person that runs one of these studies, they'll do it once in their life. Our staff does it 3 or 4 times a year. So that's the first thing we do. The second is we provide an ongoing engagement with the administration, primarily through the Department of Energy, but all parts of the federal government, to discuss what are the next questions that we should be ready to answer. Here are questions you might want answers to, or they're considering here's questions, would you be able to answer them?
Yeah.
So that's the second thing we do. And then the third thing is I make sure that the staff is feeling productive and satisfied in their jobs.
Always a good thing to say. Are you accelerating innovation?
So I personally don't. We make policy recommendations on accelerating innovation, but I'm sort of a second order effect on that. We do always make recommendations about work, additional R&D that should be done at our national laboratories. So the Department of Energy has 17 national labs. We're always making recommendations about things the national labs should put more R&D money into.
What's the best thing that will happen to the energy world in the next 10 years?
I think you're going to see a doubling of the recovery rates from U.S. shale. I think never underestimate the ability of the oil and gas industry to solve a technology problem, and they will technology and science the heck out of that problem.
Thank you, John.
Yeah, thank you very much.